Hey runners, how's it going? We got 10 weeks to go before I do my Boston qualifier marathon. Today I want to talk about how to use your heart rate for pacing your marathon. But before I get into that, let's just go over what happened with me last week. So, uh, if you watched last week's video, I said I had a 20K race last Saturday. So, the idea I had for the race was to basically do the first 10K at my marathon pace and then just see what happens after that. So I showed up for the race and I was the only one in my age group for that distance. And so I took off and I went ahead and clicked off the miles right around my marathon pace. I was shooting for a 58-minute 10K. It's a 5K loop course. So after my second loop, I came in right on the mark. So I felt good about that. And then I basically took it easy for the second 10K and just got it done because I wasn't trying to run a fast half marathon or run the whole thing at race pace at this time in my training. So it actually turned out really good. I did about 2 hours for a little over 12 miles, and that was fine. So feeling pretty good about that. This week our long run bumps up officially to 14 miles. I'll probably end up doing 15 or 16 just because of where my house is compared to where the run starts from. But yeah, I'm excited. Now we're starting to get into the longer runs. Still feeling good about everything and looking forward to getting these longer runs done. So let's talk about using your heart rate for pacing your marathon. Now, I think it's a very good tool to use, but as a general rule of thumb, I only keep an eye on my heart rate for the first half of the race, and then I focus on my running pace for the second half. And the reason for that is twofold. So first, the main reason for checking your heart rate during the first half of the race is just to make sure you're not going out too hard. I don't know about you, but I get excited at the start, and oftentimes I'll do the first mile or two uh, too quickly. And that's basically because it feels good, I feel fresh, might be talking to some friends and just tootling along. And it's really important to conserve yourself in the early miles of your marathon. And other than just the pace, is to keep an eye on your heart rate, especially if there's kind of a hilly course, which is like what ours is. Uh, in the early part of the race, you don't want to expend a lot of effort charging up these hills. And that's where you can take a look at your heart rate and go up that hill at a much more reasonable rate, not expending too much energy in the process. Now, the second reason why I generally don't pay attention to heart rate in the second half of the race is that everything being the same, your heart rate will generally keep rising as you go on a long run or during your marathon. So it starts being self-defeating trying to keep that heart rate steady during the second half of the race. It's more important to just focus on how you feel and maintaining your target pace to get that thing finished at the goal that you're shooting for than to watch your heart rate during that second half. So that's the two things. Mainly it's just to keep you comfortable in the first half and don't worry about it in the second half. So how do you know what heart rate you should be at when you're running your marathon? That really depends on how you train. Now, I use the Maffetone method. If you've been training using the Maffetone method for quite some time, in a general sense, you can, if at your calculated training, Maffetone training heart rate, you have a certain pace at that heart rate. And in a general sense, your marathon pace will usually be 15 to 20 seconds per mile faster than that pace. So if you do, let's say at your Maffetone heart rate training pace, your heart rate's, let's say it's a 940 mile, that means probably your marathon pace will be a 9-minute mile. Now, when you run that 9-minute mile, your heart rate's going to be higher, and that's the number you want to keep track of. So, as example for me, my Maffetone training heart rate is usually around 126, and my marathon racing heart rate is around 135. So when I'm starting my marathon, I want to make sure that I'm not going out too hard and that my heart rate is staying below that 135 number as much as possible until later on in the race when I don't pay attention to it. Now, if you don't use the Maffetone method or your numbers are off a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. During your marathon training, you'll have some runs where you're doing your marathon pace for several miles, and you'll have a pretty good idea at what your heart rate is when you're running that pace. And that's the number you use. It's just what you feel comfortable with, what you plan to run your marathon pace at. That's the heart rate that you want to keep an eye on during that first half of the race so that you don't expend too much energy too early in the race. Thumb 80% of your max heart rate. I don't know. It's so much different for everyone. It's really how comfortable you are. At your next marathon, give this a try. During your training, focus on what your heart rate is when you're running your target marathon pace and you're feeling good, you're comfortable. And then when you actually start your race, for the first few miles, just keep yourself at or below that heart rate until you settle into things and you can start working hard to get that PR or that target pace that you're shooting for the second half of the race. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, just let me know and I'll see you in the next one.